Welcome to a very special episode of the Cutting Room Movie Podcast. As always, as usual, I am your host, Tom Detloff. In just a few minutes, we're going to be talking with the very talented cinematographer, Larry Smith. As you all know, we're covering Only God Forgives this week on our show, so we're very excited to talk to Larry. Billy Barassa is in the co-host chair with me. Billy, it's been a while. Welcome to Season 5 of the Cutting Room Movie Podcast.
Thank you, sir. Good to be back.
Oh, man, it's so exciting to talk to you, man. This is awesome.
I'm in full fanboy mode tonight. So.
I swear to God, I'm kind of nervous too. I got to be honest with you. I'm a little bit intimidated by this man's resume, and as you know, we once had like a 2-part celebration of the life and career of one Stanley Kubrick, and Larry Smith, man, he's worked on Barry Lyndon, he's worked on The Shining, and he's the man behind the camera, Billy, on Eyes Wide Shut, dude.
I know.
I don't even know what to say about that.
I got nothing. I only want to hear stories.
Sweat's dripping from my chin right now. I'm a nervous wreck. But Billy, we're talking about Only God Forgives this week, which is a fascinating looking picture as well, and just an amazing story. Ryan Gosling gives a tremendous performance, and Nicholas Refn once again stuns everyone with this one, huh?
Oh yeah, man! It's one of my favorite movies, visually, especially over the last couple of years.
Yeah, it's quite stunning. And like I said, Larry Smith is the man behind the camera, who he also worked on Bronson and Fear X. I mean, Bronson is just another one. I'm talking to some of our fans today online, and I was just kind of giving them a little sneak about getting Larry Smith on, and all I keep hearing is, "Oh my God, Bronson! Oh my God, Bronson!" I mean, I remember screening Bronson a couple of years ago, and I was once again with Refn, you just get so locked in. It's like you're in a different world,
Oh yeah, and Bronson is the cinematography equivalent of punk rock. So it just it goes a mile a minute and changes moods so fast. It's a real masterwork.
Well, hey ho, let's go with Larry Smith then, Billy. Right?
Indeed.
All right, Larry, how are you, my man?
Yeah, good morning. Good morning to everyone. That's all of your listeners. Yeah, I'm good. A little early for me, as we discussed, but I'm good.
Well, are you a coffee drinker?
I have one coffee a day if I can. I try not to have more than one, and I try to just have like a small espresso with a little bit of milk. In France, they call it a café niçois. No, not café niçois, café noisette. And it's as much as I can manage in a day. I'm probably more a tea man, to be honest.
Well, that's good. Do you have hyperactivity problems, or?
Well, I think when I drink too much coffee, I feel my inner self vibrating.
Yeah, fair enough. I don't drink coffee, and for that exact same reason, man. I tense up. I mean, I'm a tense and nervous person to begin with, and to add coffee to that diet would just be, absurd. I watch some people. I'm sure, the younger people that you work with, you always see them probably drinking cans of Red Bull, right? I mean, how do these people do that?
They do that all the time, and you see so many people with, especially in fact, I would say I'd see more women, particularly in London,
right,
having a hit in the morning with a coffee and a cigarette. The two things, obviously, I don't say they complement each other, but they seem to go together.
They go together, man. That's right. It's a very popular combination, coffee and cigarettes. Are you not a smoker?
No, I'm not a smoker, no.
Good for you, man. I'll tell you, I got hooked on them when I was young. My whole family smoked. The whole house is full of smoke. It's the worst habit in the world, Larry.
Yeah, I'm very lucky though. I mean, I don't condemn anyone that smokes. They do what they want. I just when I'm in a smoky environment, I get really bad sore throats, and sometimes it goes to my chest and it takes like weeks to go, so I try to stay out of that.
Well, fair enough. Well, listen, we're here to talk about your amazing career. It is so impressive. Listen, I mean, like most cinephiles, I am a dear fan of Stanley Kubrick. I mean, getting into film as a teenager, my father threw Dr. Strangelove down my throat, and I was introduced to to Stanley that way, and then you wind up watching, everything that the man does, and you're just kind of like mesmerized. I still am, even as a 41-year-old male. When I go back and watch these movies, they're always almost like you're watching them for the first time. They're so impressive, and there's always so much to see, always so much to witness. He's an amazing person. You're a young man in the 1970s, and you're looking to break into to film, to feature length films. And oddly enough, you just start right at the top with Stanley Kubrick. He's making Barry Lyndon. What's fascinating to me, Larry, is that you weren't really aware of the legend of Kubrick, right?
I didn't know who he was. I mean, I knew who he was, but I didn't realize,
Know
you
who
know,
he
how
was.
I didn't know sort of how high up the ladder he was. I just, when you're young and you're busy, and the industry in those days was it's certainly more saturated than it is today, and there was probably a lot more opportunity as well in a way. You get so busy working on different jobs from day to day sometimes, and sometimes week to week, that it was hard. Everybody seemed like that they were a big player, but obviously I learned very quickly about Stanley being right up there at the top.
Right, right, of course. I mean, this man is just I mean, but at this point is absolutely legendary. Well, listen, I mean, tell our listeners real quick how you got involved with Barry Lyndon, how you got involved in the life of Stanley, because he wound up becoming a dear friend of yours.
That's correct. Yeah. Well, but like many things that happen to us in life, it was kind of by default, really. I was asked to go and do a little bit of prep work on Barry Lyndon, and literally just for a week, just to get some sets ready and some other stuff. And because Stanley, when I've always felt about Stanley that he never really had a master plan, and yet he always had a master plan.
Right.
Things, the way he worked, evolved, and so that because he never really knew how things were going to happen from one week to the next, particularly in the prep, let's just say, that he would say, well, let's get a bunch of people on for a week and let's get this going because that'll all be done in a week. But then,
Right.
the way Stanley would do, he would do something for a day or two and think, well, no, that's actually not working. So let's do this. So a week became 2 weeks, and 2 weeks became a
Right.
month, and then 18 months later, I'm still on the payroll. So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, then you always hear these stories, about everyone that's worked with Stanley, how it's just a very long but really worthwhile process. I mean, he is the an intellectual of the highest order. I mean, he loves detail, and he really loves to surround himself with really smart people that are just going to propel his film to be the best that it can. And I'm surprised that he didn't try to, in making Barry Lyndon, did he ever try to ask you if he could make it without using any kind of electricity at all, or anything
well, of,
like
well, of
that?
course, that was always the big thing with Stanley. Stanley hated the entourage feel. He if he could, he would make a film. He would do everything himself, which he did in the early days, as I'm sure you know.
Right.
He would do every aspect of filmmaking, but of course, you can't do that. You need a team and a crew. So his initial starting point would always be, and he used to say jokingly, because you have to understand about Stanley, he was one of the reasons I think we got on so well was we had a very similar sense of humor, and he used to make me laugh, and I used to make him laugh. But he used to jokingly say, "Listen, Larry, we could do the next movie in the back of my Mercedes." In other words, all the equipment could go in the trunk of the Mercedes, and that was his mentality.
Yeah.
And the other thing I quickly tell you about Stanley is that we used to test everything, before in prep, and then quite often, well, in fact, always on the day of shoots, we would do lighting tests in the evening. And Stanley was never more happier, never more relaxed than
Wow.
when he was doing lighting tests in the evening with just a group of maybe 5 or 6 people.
Wow. Wow.
He
That
was
is
much more comfortable, much more relaxed. He was just a different person altogether.
right. It's amazing to me that you talk about him, and I've read in some interviews with you how you do talk a lot about his sense of humor, and I think a lot of that translates into his film. A lot of his films, even his most serious stuff. I mean, did you ever find yourself thinking, man, this guy's really finding like a comedic, aspect to a scene that doesn't normally require comedy, right? Do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think that was his. Maybe it was subconsciously he did a lot of this. I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
he certainly liked black comedy,
Right, right, right.
black comedy is, it's one of those things because some people see black comedy as kind of, you know, not particularly heavy. They would class that as black, in almost a comedy movie, and other people go into real dark, subtle black comedy, and I think
Right.
Stanley was in that camp.
Right, right. Yeah. I mean, it's just really fascinating stuff. You work on him. You work with him on The Shining, which is
Yeah,
great. I mean,
yeah.
obviously, probably Shining is hailed as one of the greatest horror films of all time. You move on from The Shining, and you get together in the '90s to work on Stanley's last movie, Eyes Wide Shut, which is just a pure work of cinematic brilliance. I mean, when you want to, if you're going to show someone how beautiful something could look on a movie screen, you probably would start with something like Eyes Wide Shut or Only God Forgives Larry. So you're obviously working. Well,
Thank you very.
yeah, you're really doing a great job. But let's quickly talk about Eyes Wide Shut because I mean, you're on it. I think I read you're on like you're doing a location scout with Kubrick. I think it's at the mansion that the Long Island mansion that he's going to use. Well, it's in England, but the scene takes
Yeah.
place in Long Island, and you're scouting the location with him, and he's going over I think, some technical stuff with you, and he just kind of says, "Hey, you want to shoot the movie?"
Yeah, very similar. It never happened quite like that, but very similarly, similar to that. I hadn't sort of seen him for a few years. Probably the longest period in my life where I hadn't had any sort of contact with him. And and the odd thing about this was I was living literally down the road from him at this time, but it was to do with the way Stanley works, the way he always controls his movies, and what I was doing really. And he called me up one day out of the blue. Not at all a surprise to me because with Stanley, he's always going to call at some time. You just forget how time goes past so
Right.
fast. Sometimes you just don't realize how long it. And he was just chatting. We just as if like I'm talking to you now, and we were speaking an hour ago, and you've called me back. It was that kind of thing. And
Wow.
I'm in my office, and I had some small studios in London at that time, and uh, I was just doing something. They put Stanley through to me, and we just started to chat. And I remember at that time there was two or three movies out. Heat was one of them.
Right.
City Hall was another one. Two Pacino movies, and I forget what the other one was now. And that came up in conversation in topic those films, and I'd said,
Larry, can I stop you for one second? Because
yeah.
I'm fascinated with Heat, and I think that's a really underrated film. I know, I don't think it gets enough credit as being a great
Mm.
film. Did Stanley enjoy Heat? And
Yes,
do you like it?
yeah, I loved it. I thought it was a great, and also I love City Hall because I like the feel of it. I like it had something about the look of it I really liked.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
So we was just we kind of talked about that, and then he said, yeah, because Stanley saw everything. From a young boy, growing up in New York, he saw every film that came out, and when he was, had his own environment there where he could project his own movies, he saw everything, and of course everything
Okay.
was said. So he saw everything. So we chatted about that, and then like 4 or 5 hours went by. This is very normal, by the way, with us. I mean, maybe that's a bit extreme, 4 or 5 hours, but sometimes I used to have long conversations with Stanley, and about 4 or 5 hours went by. And we just hung up and said, "Oh, let's keep in touch." Put the phone down. The next day or 2 days later, I get another call. He said, "What are you doing?" He said, "What new lights are around? What are you using?" And I said, "Well, I kind of like the Dido, and I like this, and I like." And he said, "Can you bring some up the house and show me?" I said, "Yeah, sure." So a couple of days later, I go up the house, This was just a smokescreen. I realized later he didn't really care about the lights, although he was very interested in light.
Uh-huh.
So I showed him some of these lights and what they did and how small they were, and you could put them there and whatever. And then he said, let's get in the car. And that's when we drove over to this location. And he showed me this big exterior, night exterior, and he said, how would you like this? And I said, well, I think I'd probably put a light similar, although we never had them in the UK at that time, the Moscow, the Moscow light. I said, I think I'd put one of them about half a kilometre away, maybe, and just have a faint wash of that coming over, and I would have rigged a load of different kind of lights to give the same effect on a crane. He went, interesting. So we drove back to the house. We had a sandwich and a cup of coffee. Now, I'd been there 12 hours by this time. And it was quite late in the evening. So I went home. I was at Pinewood Studios about 3 days later, and I bump into a lady called June Randell, who was Stanley's continuity lady on many movies, who sadly just passed away a few weeks ago. And she said to me, do you know you're doing Stanley's movie? Oh, by the way, this was a pre-runner to Eyes Wide Shut when he was getting another movie together. So I'm jumping forward a bit here. Eventually, I go to see him again a couple of months later, and then this story that I just told you took place. And then what happened was we went back to the house. We sat and had some coffee, and he said, well, what do you think? And I was like, well, what do you mean? He said, well, do you want to do the movie?
Wow.
And my initial reaction, and this is going to sound really, really strange, was because I knew Stanley really, really well, and I'd known him by this stage like for about 24 years.
Right.
So almost, I'd known him over that period. Because I know the way he works, and I knew how my life was structured at that time.
Right. You would have to commit for a long time, right?
Well, and that was my problem, and because I was, I was very, very busy at that time. And I thought, can I change back into that lifestyle again? And I actually said, Stanley, can I think about it for a few days, and I'll come back to it. Which
who wouldn't say that to Stanley Kubrick?
Yeah, and he was a bit. I could tell by that reaction he was a bit surprised. And anyway, a few days went by, and then Jan Harlan called me up, and he said, "Larry, Stanley's. Are you going to call? Are you going to call Stanley?" I said, "Yeah." It wasn't because I was ignoring him. I've just got inundated with work. Anyway. So eventually, I kind of talked to my family. I said, look, this is going to be body and soul for probably no less than a year and a half.
Right.
Et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, the long and the short of it was I went back to him and I said, yeah, okay, I do it. But I think my whole relationship with Stanley was about that. A lot of people, and myself included over the years, but you're in awe of Stanley, and he is this godlike figure. The trouble with that is when you're always in that kind of environment with somebody of that stature, you can't do your best work. You need to be on a par with people. You need to be on a certain level, that you can communicate on an hour-to-hour, minute-to-minute, day-to-day basis, on a human level. And that was always my approach with Stanley. I always kind of treated him, and he treated me more like an equal than an employee.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's amazing. Billy Barassa is a huge fan of Eyes Wide Shut. As a matter of fact, Billy, our Eyes Wide Shut discussion alone has been listened to by over like 150,000 people. I mean, this movie is huge to some people. Billy, you got Larry Smith here. You got a question for him about Eyes Wide Shut?
Well, it is, one of my favorite movies, and Larry, it's just, probably top 3 favorite photography jobs in a film ever. I just think it's exquisite. I wanted to ask there's this, the whole film has a sort of a fairy tale feel to it, and the interesting thing to me about it is that you guys had very mundane sort of environments. It was hallways and apartments and lobbies and so forth. And all the lighting looks it looks all practical. But how was it? Was there a discussion about creating this sort of enchanted atmosphere out of what appeared to be practical lighting? Was that deliberate? And if so, what were the techniques that you guys were using to sort of create that magical look for the film?
Yeah, it was all practical lights. We used very few conventional film lights, and of course with modern film stocks, you don't really need to use huge amounts of lights these days, especially now you've got the digital era. But no, what would happen was as I alluded to earlier, everything that Stanley did, it kind of evolved. I think, the sets were built at a certain size and certain level or locations, depending where we were. And then we would, throw a bunch of stuff in there, there's always obviously a starting plan. You need a practical lamp, a table lamp, or whatever, in a hotel scenario, and then you kind of go from there. It was obviously set at Christmas, which gave you a bit more scope, to put, Christmassy type lights up in certain places. But what we would do is this was Stanley's mode of operation. He liked to test things, he liked to find out about things and test it. So we would do a whole bunch of tests for a day and look at them the next day, and then go there again and do it again the next night and change it for something else. The other thing that I'm not sure if you're aware of, or your listeners are aware of, that we decided right at the beginning of this movie to push everything 2 stops. So everything was force developed 2 stops, regardless of what the shooting stop was. Whether we were shooting at T2 or whether we were shooting at 16. Everything was pushed 2 stops: interiors, night interiors, day exteriors, day interiors.
So you could shoot in a little bit darker environment than usual, and still get a nice exposure in the print.
Yeah, it was, and it also gives you, and it kind of adds to that kind of fairy tale kind of feel, if you like, because force developing, as most cinematographers will tell you that did force. It's not a science, it can be a little bit hit and miss, because you're, depending, how long, the process is in the chemicals for, if it's, 4 or 5 seconds too long, or 30 seconds too long, it's a different look, it can be very washed out. So it's technically quite challenging. And we did get throughout the movie, our dailies that came back that were a little bit different, and we tried to. I have to be really honest. I was always, my gut feeling was, we don't need to force develop this film because the film stocks are fast enough to cope with what we wanted to do. But Stanley always had one eye; was very, very conscious about depth of field and things being in focus.
I would give anything for a time machine to go and hang out with you guys in a room, moving lights around and peering through that camera. So most of your lighting in the set was all through practicals. You actually didn't have that many, Fresnels and so forth set up.
No. I mean, I can basically remember most of the sets. If you got a particular set in mind, no, it was, I would say 85-90% of everything we did was lit with practicals. Yeah.
That's incredible.
You guys realize you're really geeking out on everyone right here, right?
Listen, I have Larry Smith on Skype. I am not letting go until I have a few of these questions answered. Mr. Smith, the interiors of those are just unbelievable to me. The yellow tungsten-y interior with those blue windows is just incredible, because it's one of those things that you see every day in real life, and you guys just nudged it a little bit, exaggerated a bit, and created something that it's funny, no one had ever really thought to do that before, and also it hasn't really been copied since. So. Was that a conscious choice to do that, to create that particular yellow-blue palette?
No, it wasn't actually. Again, it's something that kind of evolved. We know that the yellow palette would always be there because of the nature of the lights we were using, and it was always a very kind of warm. Had always had a warm look. I always liked blue. It complements the warm orangey yellow colours, and really the saturated blue look just came about because I was just adding layers of blue in the lighting test just to see what this looks like, and did it go too far or did it not? And one of Stanley's sayings that he always used to say is, is it real or is it interesting? and interesting sometimes is much better than real.
Huh.
That's awesome.
Wow. Absolutely fascinating. Uh, Kubrick. Let's move on to Nicholas Refn, Larry.
Yeah.
So you go from one mad genius to another, huh?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm watching this guy's movies, and I don't want to say he's, like Kubrick, but he definitely is a guy that is obsessed with detail and set design and lighting and telling the story, really telling the story through the camera, which is always far more interesting than anything else. How do you get involved with Nicholas Refn early on?
Well, as you probably know, Nicholas was a big fan of Kubrick as well. So
Mhm.
obviously that was part of the
Right.
connection.
Right,
I was shooting.
so he's attracted to your work, right? I mean, your resume.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, he was. What happened was I was shooting him, and I got a call from his producer, a guy called Johnny Anderson,
Hmm.
who I happen to know because he was head of TV at an advertising agency in Denmark, who I went and shot some commercials for a few years before. And I don't know how the conversation came up, but he said, I kind of know Larry a little bit, and I'll call him, and I'll see if he's interested in doing FX, which is when I first came across. And we were in the desert. I remember I was in the desert. We were under canvas shooting for a few weeks, and there wasn't too much communication out there, but I'd got this kind of message,
Hmm.
and I remember when I got it, someone had brought a message into it. We were in a one of the sort of luxury. I was in Dennis Hopper's tent with I believe Diane Kruger and I can't remember somebody else. We were playing cards. We didn't have anything. It was the evening.
I hope it was a sober Dennis Hopper.
It was. Well, he wasn't. It was. He wasn't. He was way after his
Okay.
mad days.
Okay.
And it was always. And he was a very intense poker player as well, or
Right.
whatever the game we were playing. Anyway, can you? Somebody sent this DVD for you to have a look at, and it was for one of his movies, Pusher. One of his early
Right. It's
things that
early
he
early
did.
ones. Yeah.
Yeah, and but I had nothing to play it on. And it was Christopher Lambert was there. That's right. And Christopher had a DVD player, and he lent me a DVD player, and I watched this film Pusher, and I thought, well, this was quite interesting. And then when we got back to Cape Town, we had a phone conversation. We talked pretty much like we are here, and he told me about this film he wanted to do I mean, we were going to do it in America at that time. It ended up being done in Canada,
Uh-huh.
and being shot in Canada, and that was it really. I went to Canada and you shot this movie, met him, and we shot this movie together.
Right. And you keep coming back, right? I mean, you're a repeat offender. Like Kubrick, this guy likes to gather pretty much the same people every film, right?
Yeah, I think he's comfortable working with with certain people all of the time. Yeah,
Mhm.
I guess that is true of a lot of us. We get in a bit of a comfort zone with people, our
That's
teams,
yeah.
our crew, or whatever.
Right, right. So let's talk a little bit about Only God Forgives because we are discussing the film this week on the show, and I had an opportunity to watch it today for the first time. Billy, of course, has seen it multiple times,
Mm.
but it was really fascinating to watch, Larry. And for me, let me just talk to you as a just I mean as a fan of cinema and what I'm watching today, because there's very little dialogue in this film. So I guess Refn is really relying on you and Cliff Martinez really to tell the
Yeah.
story. I mean, that's what I'm getting here. And
Mm.
this is like an amazing. I'm getting chills right now just remembering what I watched a few hours ago. It's an amazing way to tell a story. Let me just ask you real quick because we the movies that we're doing the next 2 weeks revolve around Cliff Martinez's work actually,
Hmm.
and were you? I mean, when you're how can I put this? Like when you're making this movie, first of all, are you and Martinez like do you collaborate at all? Like while you're filming, or do you have a discussion with him? Because it seems to me that you two are really in cahoots here in the storytelling.
No, I had no communication
Wow.
at all. None. I mean,
Wow.
I didn't, I knew that he was doing the music, but we
Right.
had no communication.
Right. Right.
Listen, that was a tough. Maybe was maybe the toughest movie that I think I ever did. It be just because of the schedule, the heat where we were in Bangkok. We shot 8 weeks of nights, which
Hmm.
is very, very challenging. I hate nights anyway. My body clock, I'm a morning person. You can get me up at 3 in the morning, shoot, I'm happy to do that. To
Okay.
do 8 weeks of nights, 6 days a week, I can tell you is a killer.
And yeah.
So I didn't have any kind of forward thinking about, the music or anything like that.
It seems to me that he is using you mostly. You Refn is using you and your camera work to really tell the story, to capture the emotions of the actors, particularly Gosling, who's in most of the, who's
Yeah,
really carrying the movie. His character is carrying the movie,
yeah.
and I mean, so are you completely aware of this? Because there's so little dialogue in this movie, so everything that you're doing becomes heightened, right? Everything that you're doing as a
Yeah.
cinematographer becomes heightened.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's very interesting. I realised, as you quite rightly allude to, there isn't much dialogue in there in this, which obviously affects the structure of the script.
Hmm.
And I realised probably after the second night of shooting, the way this movie was going to go. The way Nicholas was trying to work it out, and Ryan was involved in the process as well, etc.,
Hmm.
etc. And I kind of thought, well, okay, so what do I add to this? How do I how do I help this movie? And because it was a very low budget movie, and there weren't big sets. They were they might there was big locations, but there were quite often there was no real set. You know what I mean? So you had to kind of help to create that by lighting. It was just a lot of open spaces, and so I thought, well, okay, what I'll do is here I'll just throw myself into a very kind of theatrical situation here, as if I kind of in my mind I was lighting various sets on a stage,
Hmm.
and hope that would be part of the cement that would carry on whatever it was that was going on in the head of sort of Nicholas and however Ryan was seeing his role, etc., etc. So I think we were kind of in a way all working in tandem, in parallel, really, kind of doing
Wow.
our own thing because of the nature of the script. You couldn't pick the script up and go, right, okay, this is how this is working. The emotions are going to work this way. And then also equally because of the way the sets were,
Right.
because of the
Right.
way. So I kind of, I felt that I just went along and what I was, and if there was any problem with anything, we'd have a discussion about it. And there never really was, we just, I think it was so intense. There was so much going on in everybody's
Hmm.
mind
Hmm.
that, it was almost like, let's see what you've got and let's
Wow.
compare later on. It was almost like
Wow.
that.
Wow. That's amazing how much you got out of this film by working like that. So Billy, you're onto something here because it seems to me that there was a lot of improvisation in their shooting schedule.
Yeah, Larry, from what I understand, there was a lot of dialogue in the script, and it was cut out day by day through
Yeah.
the shooting. Is that true?
Yeah, I think that's probably that was. I mean, I don't think it was one of those scripts you would ever say was overwritten, but there was certainly more dialogue in there than appeared in the finished movie. That's for sure. And yes, it did get reduced more and more. And I think that was how the movie evolved. Once the character starts to build. And how the first kind of week or two of shooting went because I guess that was kind of a natural phenomenon that happened really because of how the first week or so went.
It was, I mean, the movie is absolutely beautiful. It sounds like it was a huge pain in the ass to shoot, but the end result is just, it's like a lurid nightmare inside a pinball machine or something,
Yeah,
it's just
Wow.
incredible. It looks like
yeah,
it's lit with
Yeah.
arcade games.
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
And
again,
how
it gets back to that. I didn't use any film lights. I didn't use any regular. I mean, I think on the day exterior when Scott Thomas came to the hotel for that first scene that she's in, I put a light outside of a window there just to give it something. But I used like zero. It was all practical lights. I clipped a fluorescent up here, a street lamp here, whatever. That's how it was shot.
Wow.
Holy cow, that's amazing.
This guy's an animal, Billy.
I just that's another one. I would like to just be following you around, seeing how you set up those shots, man.
Right.
Because it looks so designed. That's the interesting thing is it looks really designed.
Yeah,
Like every image is sort of like a graphic,
yeah.
color cutouts of faces and backgrounds. But all that was practical, huh?
Yeah, it's all driven by how fast you have to work to be able. And like my theory about these kind of lower budget films, art house films, call them what you want, is that, you get, depending where you're shooting in the world, you might get a sort of a 10, 11 hour day, of which, you've got to take some refreshments into account in that as well. But there are so many things that get in the way in a shooting day, and some of them could be technical problems, some of them could be artist problems, etc., etc. So you have to say, well, what's the realistic amount of time you can shoot in a day? And probably on the average movie set, the actual time the camera turns over might be as little as 6 or 7 hours. So you're losing 40% of your day maybe. So my theory is always try to give the director, from my side, the maximum shooting time in a day. Don't fiddle and fuss around on certain kinds of scenes that you don't need to. Get something in there, have a formula, give them 10 hours if you can. There's always something else that gets in the way. But I try to give a director the maximum amount of shooting hours, and that means you have to work fast.
Wow. Wow.
That's
It
fabulous.
is. Larry, I mean, it's great spending time with you, talking to you. I know you're a busy man. I do want to get a quick chance to talk to you about trafficking, because this is your first time in the director chair, man. Right? I mean, this
Yeah,
is so. I mean, this is a work that obviously, I mean, it's a labor of love for you, I'm sure.
yeah.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit about trafficking and where they could maybe get a chance to check it out?
Yeah, sure. It's called Trafficker, actually.
Oh,
It's
Trafficker. I'm so my bad.
Trafficker. No, no, that's fine. No, no, that's fine. It's
Sorry.
called Trafficker. It's a movie that I've never really had the inclination to be a director. I mean, I direct some television. I used to direct a lot of television commercials, but I didn't. It's not something I'm much more comfortable, in my day job, which is being a cinematographer. But I do like true stories, and this is a story that's inspired by true events. And I like stories that have a human angle to it. And as we know,
Right.
trafficker is never, or trafficking in general is never, people trafficking, I'm talking about now, is never far away from us. And it doesn't matter where we live, whether we're in Europe, whether we're in the US,
Uh-huh.
there's stories, day-to-day stories that come out. You think, how is this possible? But in certain parts of the world, it's a way of life.
That's
And,
amazing. Wow.
I picked this story up from a friend of mine who I was, and he said, do you want to read this script? And I just remembered it. And I got a bunch of guys together that financed it. And I wanted to make this movie. It's a low budget movie. I shot it in Thailand, and it's just about a family that tried to do better for themselves. A young family that moved from Vietnam in the 80s. The original story was to go to Malaysia. Why they would go to Malaysia, what drove them to go there from these little villages in the north of Vietnam, I have no idea. But and it's their journey, and of course, horrible things happen to them.
Yeah.
With it's just a harrowing story. It's not an easy watch, but it's a story where you have to put your hand on your heart and go, there for the grace of God, go on. It's like we could have been born in those kind of environments, and that could have
Right.
been us,
Right.
and it still goes on today. It will go on tomorrow. Anyway, get back to the movie. It's not out yet. I've just finished it. We're just in the process of submitting it to some festivals,
Okay.
which is what one of the reasons I'm actually in Dubai, to speak to some of the people that put some money into it, and hopefully we'll try and get a distribution deal with it, and get it out there so people can see. And I hope I hope when they see it, they look at it from all aspects, and not just of
Right.
necessarily because I lit it and direct it, but because of the story. It's more about the story than
It's
it
a
is about.
message. It's a message that obviously is at heart to you, and
Yeah.
it's a story that you want people to you want people to learn from this.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and basically this was just like a very honest family that just try to do better for themselves,
Right.
like we all try to do. It's like just like putting food on the table, to coin a phrase.
Right. Do me a favor when you're pitching the story to whomever, make sure that they know that the name of it is Trafficker and not Trafficking.
Yeah. Yeah,
It's
Trafficker. You can see it. You can watch the trailer if the trailer you can watch on
I
our
will
website.
definitely. I'm definitely
Yeah.
gonna. I'll put it up on the on our
I think
webpage.
it's on YouTube, and I
Right.
think our website is traffickerthemovie.com, and you can see a taste of it on there.
Well, no doubt I will put it up on our website with this interview, Larry. I cannot thank you enough, seriously, for taking time out of your extremely busy schedule to come on and talk to us about your amazing career. I honestly, I'm in the driver's seat with you, dude. I'm gonna continue to watch your movies, and I look forward to seeing Trafficker. I really do. I mean, we're all gonna watch it, and hopefully, when we get access to it, maybe you could come back on and talk to us about it in more detail.
Yeah, I'd love to. And listen, it's been great to speak to you guys, and I just feel honored to be able to share some of these things with everyone.
Oh man, it's been fabulous. It brought a really great big smile to my face, and I want to thank you, Billy. It's time to say goodbye to Larry.
I don't want to, but I know that we have to.
Talk to him for hours.
Larry, if ever you're in New York, look me up. I'll buy you a beer, and I'll listen to every story you have to tell about any one of the films you've worked on.
All right, Billy. Thank you very much for your kind comments. Thank you, and thank you, Thomas. And have a great evening.
You too, my friend, and thanks a lot, Larry. We really appreciate it. Wow,
Take
Larry. Yeah, you got it, Larry Smith, Billy, huh?
Okay, take care.
Yeah.
Be safe. Bye bye.
Got it, Billy. Amazing man, huh?
Yeah. So that was awesome.
That was pretty cool. Yeah, it's so funny to me, real quick before we say goodbye, how we're always, we talk to directors, I mean, we've talked to directors. We mostly talk to the actors, but geez Louise, was that just like, I felt like I just got done with like a college course there.
That was an introduction to a college course that I would like to take.
But yeah, I mean, he's just really great. I mean, you listen to him talking. What do you want to do now? You want to go and watch a movie right now, don't you?
It's yeah. I as someone who looks at movies obviously from a very visual point of view,
right.
There's just I love when you look at a shot and you don't really realize how beautiful it is, but then the sum of its parts, you think about a movie and the images just linger in your head,
right?
Right. Like anyone who loves a particular movie can instantly recall the scenes from it, the images that they loved and everything, And man, that guy's worked on a couple that are just phenomenal.
Right. I mean, Only God Forgives and Eyes Wide Shut are just two. I mean, this is extraordinary work. I mean, I'm talking about like historic work, really. I mean, wouldn't you say, like in the cinematic universe?
Yeah. Well, even to I mean, Barry Lyndon obviously is
right.
It's in the folklore of pretty much every movie that Kubrick worked on. There was some technical advancement of some kind or another. And that one for photography is obviously, top 10 advances in film technology. So, yeah, he seems to have fallen into the right place at the right time more often than once.
Absolutely. So. I mean, yeah, what a fascinating dude. Well, Billy, listen, I'm going to wrap it up now. And I cannot thank you enough for coming on. I'm so glad I had an opportunity to do an interview with you, just me, you and I,
I know.
It was great. I loved it. You were just great. You were so natural. You were in there. You got a lot of information out of him. I mean, that was just some really good stuff, dude. I really appreciate it.
It's a great way to kick off my return to the new season, man.
Absolutely. All right, Billy. Like I said, everybody, coinciding with this interview is our discussion on Only God Forgives. You can check it out at the cuttingroompodcast.com. Hey, quite simply, without it being a big deal, we are over and we are out. Ciao.
Tune in next time to satisfy more of your strange desires. The Cutting Room Movie Podcast. We do chicken right.